Why do people tell stories? It's a tradition that can be traced all the way back to cave paintings, meaning it's almost as ingrained in our psychology as the need to eat or sleep. For centuries, people have used storytelling to grapple with the unknown and paint the world in an understandable light. Just as dreams are the brain making sense of information from the day, stories are our way of coming to terms with the world around us and the functions therein. Some stories are told to make people laugh, some are told to make people sad, and another genre exists solely to create fright, playing on the innate and instinctive fear response for the sake of entertainment. Horror storytelling has existed for thousands of years, with some early stories dating back to the Roman Empire and ancient Greece. Even an iconic modern work of horror like Frankenstein was heavily influenced by ancient stories of death and revival, while other works such as Dracula can be traced to the real-life terrors of Vlad III. In this way, horror represents a means for people to grapple with real fears in a safe environment, coming to terms with what scares them under the pretext of entertainment.
So many iconic films and characters originate from horror storytelling, and the influence the genre has had on the media landscape cannot be understated. While many exist solely for the scares, some notable films like The Shining have managed to transcend the genre and stand alone as classic films. Today we're going to explore horror storytelling, the categories within, and why it remains the most polarizing genre of film to this day.
The psychology behind why audiences watch and like horror movies is very unique. Horror is the only genre of film created to elicit fear consistently and deliberately, as opposed to sporadically or incidentally. When discussing the psychology of horror, it's essential to understand its three specific appeals, as specified by psychologist Glenn D. Walters as tension, unrealism, and relevance. Each of these aspects are created by filmmakers and editors to draw in the audience and communicate the story. Tension is created through added elements of mystery, suspense, gore, shock, and jump scares, aka through action and events, while unrealism is made through angles and filters, aka through perspectives and aesthetics, that make it clear to viewers that they are not seeing the real world or real threats. When horror is applied to common fears, such as the fear of death, or to current events, like in Season 7 of American Horror Story, centered around the 2016 election, it is referred to as universal relevance. When a viewer personally relates to characters and their routes of survival, it's referred to as personal relevance. Fear is an emotion often associated with horror, but the real appeal lies in the physical and emotional release following a scary situation, and through this release, audiences can deal with the fear in a safe environment. Physical effects of consuming horror films includes shivering, closing of the eyes, startle response, shielding of the eyes, trembling, paralysis, withdrawal, heaving, and screaming. Physiological effects include increasing heart rate and galvanic skin response. Mentally, it can create anxiety, fear, empathy, and thoughts of disgust. According to media studies researcher Mary Beth Oliver, when psychologist Dolph Zillman's excitation transfer theory is applied to horror, it argues that our enjoyment of horror films comes from a feeling of suspense. When a threat is resolved, our negative affect converts to euphoria, and suspense ends. The vital aspect of the theory is that our enjoyment is derived from the degree of negative effect built up during exposure to the horror film, and from the positive effect/reaction that results from the resolution of the threat. If the resolution does not occur, then residual negative effect will lead to increased dysphoria. If there is no suspense, but complete certainty about what will happen, suspense is replaced by dread.
Over the history of horror films, the genre has seen its fair share of changes and new immersion of subgenres, including but not limited to found footage, body horror, comedy horror, and many, many more. Since it's impossible to go over every genre, we'll just take some time to review the most expanded and most notable.
Much like horror within literature, the figures that we tend to fear symbolize a common and more deeper fear of a culture or an individual. An example of this is found in the psychological thriller 2017 film Get Out. Inspired by the 2008 election of Barack Obama, director Jordan Peele wanted to create a horror film reflecting the fears of minority groups within America. Get Out was not the first film to make a social critique on modern culture, but it has established itself as a modern classic through its impactful imagery and memorable scenes. Other notable films within psychological horror include Mother, Funny Games, and The Shining. Supernatural and ghost horror is probably the most memorable genre of horror. Including many subgenres of their own, the fears within supernatural horror mostly include the fear of the other. Sometimes the other is someone else, sometimes the other is ourselves.
Ghosts within horror also represent the question of what happens after we die and the dealing with the grief of lost loved ones. Whereas supernatural films, more specifically films about exorcism, are religious in subtext and explore the fear of the evil incarnate, the devil.
Because of how expansive this genre is, there are hundreds upon hundreds of films, all including ghosts or the supernatural, but all with their own distinct tone and unique experience. Some worth noting are The Exorcist, Dracula, and Poltergeist. Lastly, we will explore the slasher genre of horror. Making its peak in the 70s and 80s, many film critics give the title of the original slasher to the 1960 film Psycho. However, when thinking of the word slasher, what probably comes to mind is a creepy man with a burned face, or a creepy man wearing a hockey mask, or a creepy man wearing another mask. Let's just say this genre is full of creepy men.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul too.
With some characters being more supernatural than others, this genre of film explores the fear of what sinister deeds mankind is truly capable of. It is the embodiment of the fear of the person next to you. Notable films within this genre include A Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, and Friday the 13th.
Throughout history, scary stories have been used to pass the time. Monsters and ghouls have existed in our stories for thousands of years, not only for entertainment purposes, but also for teaching lessons and embracing common fears. For some, horror is a thrilling experience, and for others is extremely anxiety-inducing.
Horror is a very common genre in both movies and stories. Each story involves monsters, ghosts, or even humans, and explores the effects of the supernatural on its consumers. Stories of horror are commonly used for entertainment purposes, but also serve another purpose to the people who enjoy horror stories. It's very common for people to think of horror and immediately relate it to fear. However, most avid enjoyers of horror media are more interested in the release that comes after experiencing the fear brought on. Either way, horror is a thrilling genre that can be enjoyed or feared by its viewers, or sometimes both.